screen one. Now the question paper is visible. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Right. So the other day we were discussing, let me zoom it. Yeah, the other day we saw discuss the hierarchy of plans, wherein we saw it starts from vision and ends at plans. Then what are the different steps involved in planning? That also we discussed. Planning. There are some 8 steps which we discussed. Now let us proceed with what is decision making, classify the different types of decisions. Decision making. What is decision making? Decision is a choice between two or more alternatives. Suppose you have gone for a shop to buy shirt or your dress. So you make a decision. Which one should I buy? When there are more than one alternative. So that is a kind of decision. It is everywhere. Even in the industrial life, decision makes a major role. A decision is a choice between two or more alternatives. This implies choosing, alternatives, and purpose. There are three characters while making a decision. First one is choosing, deciding what to do on the basis of some conscious and deliberate logic or judgment. So when we touch any dress material, at the back of our mind, consciously we know my liking is this kind of color, my liking is this kind of design. So if you look at your wardrobe, if you look at your cupboard, you will see everybody, of course it's everybody, you will see same color dresses more than 50%, because unknowingly we choose the same color again and again. In the same way, when a consumer buys certain things, he buys again and again the same things or similar things. Therefore, choosing becomes a very important factor in decision making. So, choosing is a deciding what to do on the basis of some conscious and deliberate logic or judgment. There is some logic which is going on. Maybe we do not understand sometimes, but certainly certain things happen. Some judgment happens because of which we choose certain colors, certain designs. Second one is alternatives. To make decision, there must be alternatives. There must be more than one product. Then only will the question of decision will come. Otherwise, there is no question of decision. It requires wisdom and experience to evaluate several alternatives and select the best one. Yes, if there are alternatives, choosing the best one is important. Therefore, alternatives have to be there while making the decision. Third one is purpose. In the mind, while making the decision, we have the purpose in the mind. So that this particular decision, why I'm making, there is a certain purpose. So purpose is in the mind, so that the decision brings them closer to some goals. There are some goals. To achieve that goal, there is some purpose, and to fulfill that purpose, we are making certain decision. So this is how the decision plays a role. A decision is a choice between two or more alternatives, and it implies choosing, alternatives, and purpose. Then coming to classify the different types of decision. What are the different types of decisions? Classification is done based on 6 different heads. There are 6 different heads. First one is programmed and non-programmed decisions. Programmed and non-programmed decisions. Second one is major and minor decisions. Third one is routine and strategic decisions. Fourth one is individual and group decisions. Fifth one is simple and complex decisions. Sixth one is heuristic and intuitive decisions. So let us look at them briefly. Programmed decisions are those that are made in accordance with some policy, rule, or procedure so that they do not have to be handled each time they occur. These decisions are generally repetitive. Programmed decision means every day morning 9 o'clock reporting to the office. So there is a set of rule. As per the rule, everybody is following. Programmed decisions. Non-programmed decisions. Non-programmed decisions are non-repetitive in nature. So on August 15th, everybody will report to office at 8 o'clock. It is non-programmed. It is for that specific day. These examples I am giving so that you understand what is what. But these examples we have to give with respect to industries. Second one is major and minor decisions. They can be measured the relative significance of a decision in 4 ways. So to say something is a major decision, to say something is a minor decision, we have to look at these 4 questions. Degree of futurity of the decision. So how much futuristic the decision is. Impact of decision on other functional areas. If I make this decision, how it is going to affect on the other areas attached to it. Quantitative factors and qualitative factors that enter the decision. So if I make this decision, how it is going to improve the quality of the process, quality of the product, recurrence of the decision, how often I am making the decision. If I am making the decision every day, then it's a minor decision. If I make the decision once in a while, and because of which these things become futuristic, then they are called major decision. Major decisions are something like, yes, from 2021 February, we are going to manufacture flexible mobiles. Are you getting this? So because of which so many things will change. So that is a major decision. And next, from March 1st, we are going to stop the production of low-end mobiles, low-featured mobiles. That's also a big decision, major decision. So such decisions are called either major or minor. And if small decisions are happening on daily basis, weekly basis kind of thing, they are called minor decisions. If there is not much disturbance is happening because of these decisions. Then coming to routine and strategic decisions. Routine decisions are present. These are supportive to companies' ongoing activities. Routine decisions. So during the meetings of the managers from different departments, they decide certain things to implement. They are called routine decisions. These help in improving the company's activities, such as lowering the price, changing the product line, installation of an automatic plant, etc. are strategic decisions. Routine decisions are very simple and uh, immediately they are put into action, whereas strategic decisions are like reduction of the price of the product. It is a strategic decision. This is not a routine decision. Today I am reducing the decision and reducing the price, and tomorrow I am increasing the price. That cannot happen. Okay, next season, next Yugadi, 10% discount on all the products. That is a strategic decision. They require lengthy deliberations and large funds and are to be taken by managers at higher levels. Generally, routine decisions are taken by middle management and the strategic decisions are taken by top management. Next one is individual and group decisions. Individual decisions are taken where the problem is of routine nature. Routine means very often it is happening where the analysis of variable is simple and where definite procedures to deal with problems are already exist. Okay, if this happens, what needs to be done? There is already a procedure. They are called individual decisions. So such as group decisions are such as important price decisions are likely to be group decisions. In making which various individuals and departments participate. Suppose we are discussing on the price issues, which department has to participate in it? The relevant department has to participate. Suppose I am making the pricing decision for the coming Yugadi season. There is no point in including the people from housekeeping in that meeting because in no way they are connected with the price. So such decisions are called individual decisions or group decisions. Then simple and complex decisions. When variables to be considered for solving a problem are few, then the decision is simple. Okay. There are few variables to be solved, then it is called a simple decision. When the variables are many, the decision is called as complex decision. Complex decision. The last one is heuristic and intuitive decisions. Heuristic decisions are rules of thumb which organizations evolve from their experiences for use in recurring decision solutions. Example, cut down in advertisement in a recession time. It's a common sense. It's the rule of thumb. When there is a downfall in the market, there is no point in pushing the advertisements, which you might have seen during this corona last 9 months. Almost the advertisements were nil because people knew everywhere there is a lockdown. People don't have money to buy. Even if they give the advertisement, only it is a cost. There is no revenue against it. Then slowly it started regaining. When there started the movement of the people started transacting. Then now we can see the advertisements are coming so that they can match the advertisement cost. So the intuitive decisions are also known as seat of the plants. Seat of the plants. Seat of the plants. Decisions. The decision maker relies on his intuition or hunch. The intuitive decisions are the decisions on the intuition. It's very top level management. They can see the future. They have the broader vision. Therefore, they make certain decisions. Maybe today we are in 2021, right? Top management sees by 2030, there will be flying cars. It is the intuition. It is the intuition based on the experience, broad experience. Then they will start designing, prototype testing, and creating the facility for production of flying cars, which will be released in 2030. Such decisions are called as intuitive decisions. This requires a lot of vision and intuition. These are the different types of decisions. Next, let us see what are the various principles of management. What are the various principles of management? principles of management. Principles of management are basically into management involves through these functions, they can be called as principles: planning, organizing, staffing, directing, coordinating, reporting, budgeting, leading, controlling. So what we have to do is we have to write the definition of each of this word with respect to management. That will become answer for this particular question. What are the various principles of management? Next question let us take. Explain the steps in selection process. Selection process. Let us look at the chapter staffing. Under the chapter staffing, we see this selection process. What is the selection process? We are trying to recruit the manpower for the open positions. Here, it is a process of recruitment, the right persons for the open positions. Let us see the steps. Steps in selection process. First one is application bank. Application bank. Second one is initial interview of the candidate. Once we receive all the applications, then we sort the application based on the strength of the candidate, requirement of the organization, then initial interview of the candidate. The candidates are called for the interview for a particular date, and the panel of interview looks at the candidate's profile. Employment tests. Employment tests. So there will be some written tests. That is also a part of selection process. Then checking the references. Generally in big organizations, they ask, give 3 references. So we have to write in our biodata or resume 3 references who can tell about you. Who can tell about you. They should not be your relatives. That's the only condition. So checking the references. Once this process is over, the HR, Human Resource Department, it will talk to the references what you have given. Then they will find out what is your background. Then physical and medical examinations. Yes, to join all industries, they require good health and good physical strength. So these examinations are done by the doctor assigned by the organizations, physical and medical examination, because your eyesight should be good. If you are working in industry with the machines, your eyesight must be good. Physical, of course, physical is required for most of the jobs. Then the final interview. After doing all these things, they will decide to recruit this candidate or not, select the candidate or not. These are the various steps. Application bank, initial interview of the candidate, employment tests, checking the references, physical or medical examinations, final interview. So we have to write briefly about all these things. Next question is, what are the various types of organizations? Explain line organization. What are the different types of organization? They are not asking the definition of organization, but if we start with the definition of the organization, it's a good practice. An organization is a social unit or human grouping deliberately structured for the purpose of attaining specific goals. What is an organization? It's a group of the people. It's part of the society. Organization is part of the society where people have come together for attaining certain goals. Maybe it is the goals of the self, it's the goals of the organization. That's what is organization. Let's look at various types of organizations. There are two types of organizations. One is the let me exactly give the name of those organizations. Line organization and tall organization. Line organization and tall organization. They are, yes, tall organizations. That means vertically they are very long, tall organizations. See, look at the tower. Look at the tower. Means very less people are working at the bottom line. There are few managers above them. Again, there are few managers. Again, there are few managers. Then later on, we see the top management. So it's a very tall organization. The span of control is good because each individual is handling very few people. Generally, six. Six is the ideal number of control for the control. A manager will be having six subordinates. That is a better control because he will be able to talk to them individually so that goals can be achieved. This is called the tall organization. And second one is the line organization, or wherein we have more span of control. One manager is having more people to report to him. Therefore, we can see this is a shallow kind of organization. It is not tall, it is width-wise, it is very long. Many people are working at the bottom level management, then very few managers, and above which there is a top management. Very less stages between the last person and the top management. It is there is a ease of control out of this. Top manager, top management can directly communicate with the low level management. There are certain advantages and disadvantages of both of this kind of organizations, but we need to discuss them. There is a pros and cons will be there. Then explain line organization. Line organization, it means we have taking the case of some appliances department, Samsung appliances. If you take Samsung appliances, all home appliances will be dealt with this department. There will be top management for that. There will be middle level management. There is operations. There is finance. There is production. There is sales. There are advertisements. All these departments will be attached to this appliance department of the Samsung. Whereas Samsung is handling many other products also. This we are taking one particular line of their production. In the similar way, we can also look at Bharat Electronics Limited, BEL. The company BEL is producing different products, but we can consider BEL supplying products to only military departments. So that is called a particular line. This kind of examples we can give for the line organizations. Next, let us see what is centralization and decentralization. Centralization and decentralization. There is a meaning in the word itself, meaning in the question itself. Centralization, decentralization. Just a minute. Henry Fayol says, Henry Fayol comments on this centralization, decentralization. What he says is, everything that goes to increase the importance of the subordinates. See, look at the words. Everything that goes to increase the importance of the subordinates' role is decentralization. And everything that goes to reduce it is centralization. So this is what is the definition of centralization and decentralization. If in an organization, the subordinates means the people, the bottom level people, if they are more important, then it is called decentralized organization. And if that importance is getting reduced, in some of the organizations we can see only top level management is important. Bottom level manpower is not of so importance. Then such organizations are called as centralized organizations. This is the clear-cut distinctions between centralization and decentralization. A definition given by Henry Fayol. Everything that goes to increase the importance of subordinates role is decentralization, and everything that goes to reduce it is centralization. So there are few advantages and of both the concepts, centralization and decentralization. Like advantages of centralization. What are the advantages of centralization? So centralization, what is happening here? Subordinates are getting less importance. So because of which what happens, coordination of the activities of subordinates is better achieved, because whole control is at the top management. There is no duplication of efforts or resources, because top management observes all these things. Decisions taken into account the interest of the organizations, because top management involves in every decision. They are able to see what is required next. Accordingly, the decisions are taken. Strong central leadership develops, which may be required in crisis. This is very important. In case of crisis, if the importance is not in the hands of the top management, then the organization may fail. Therefore, under crisis, a strong leader can lead the organization if it is a centralized organization. These are some of the advantages of centralization. Looking at the advantages of decentralization. Advantages of decentralization. It develops, it ensures the development of employees. Look at the advantages of decentralization. It ensures the development of the employees. It facilitates the diversification of products, activities, and markets. Decentralization. It leads to competitive climate within the organization. Decentralization. Between the group of the people, we can create a healthy competition so that everybody starts working with their full potential because importance is given to subordinates. It permits quicker and better decision making. Decentralization. It reduces problems of communicating and red tapeism. Of course, red tapeism comes under centralization. Therefore, problems of tapeism are less in decentralization. These are few of the advantages of both of these, centralization and decentralization. Now let us look at explain Maslow's and Herzberg theories of motivation. Maslow's and Herzberg theories of motivation. Let us look at them. Motivational theory. Just a minute. Just a minute. Just a minute. Yes, motivational theory. First of all, look at the question itself. These are the theories of motivation. First of all, let us understand why this motivation is required. Why the motivation is required. So, what is this motivation? Motivation is what controls human behavior. So, motivation is something that controls the human behavior. If you want your younger brother to do some work for you, you give him some gift. They do. So, that is a motivation. That is a motivation for them. It changes the behavior of a person and gives directions to it. In the same way, in the organizations, to change the behavior of the people working for the organization, motivation is a necessity. Motivation is a necessity. What controls human behavior and gives directions to it? Not the need, but the incentive. It is the incentive. Motivation is an incentive. It's not the need. It's not the basic thing. It is an additional incentive. By changing the incentive, maybe positive incentive or negative incentive, one can change an individual behavior. This is the definition given by B.F. Skinner. The definition given by Skinner for motivation is that which controls the human behavior by giving the direction to it. It is not the need, but it is the incentive. By changing the incentive, positive or negative, one can change an individual's behavior. Now let us look at Maslow's theory of motivation. Maslow's need hierarchy theory is the most famous theory. It's the most famous theory given by Maslow, wherein there are 5 steps a person has to move forward on these steps as early as possible, so that he attains the self fulfillment, he attains the realization of the life. See, look at the steps, Maslow's hierarchy theory, Maslow's theory of motivation. The first step is food, water, and shelter. Roti, kapda, or makan. Food, water, and shelter. Basic physiological needs, they are called basic physiological needs. Man, not man, human strives for this. Basic, basic struggle is to gather these things: food, water, and shelter. Second stage is safety and security. Then the human behavior will start looking for the safety and security. That is to avoid the unexpected things. So he takes care of all those things which he can handle if some unexpected things happen. That means he starts collecting the wealth. He starts becoming more wealthier, more healthier, buys the insurance policies, health insurance policies, life insurance policies, a better vehicle. See, look at this. Vehicle is different, a better vehicle is different. Better vehicle means which will not give trouble to him, which will perform better, which will improve his performance. This is the second stage, safety and security. Third stage is social status. After doing this, the behave human starts expecting that in the society I should be important. How can I become important? By building a big house, by buying more land, by having a better car, imported car, by celebrating all the activities. See, this gives a feel of importance for a person, feel of importance for a person. So that is also the human behavior, part of human behavior. That is the third stage, social status. Somehow he tries to improve his status in the society and starts feeling, I have, I am important. People should call me for everything, and I should be given the center chair in the programs. If somebody ignores him, he feels hurted. That is social status. Then comes esteem needs. Esteem needs. That is the respect. Respect he expects from the local, from his own family first, then from his relatives, then from the street, then from his own village, from his own state. Maybe internationally he starts expecting the respect. Afterwards, the last stage is self fulfillment. The fifth stage is self fulfillment. Then, when he reaches to any human reaches to this self fulfillment, then he understands, see, all this travel was useless. So, without this, also, I would have been happier. But at the initial stage, those who are at level number one, basic physiological needs, they can never be into self fulfillment stage unless they cross all these steps, unless they climb all these steps. What is self fulfillment? Self fulfillment is something like it cannot be actually. defined, but it can be given with an example. See, look at the musicians. Look at the yes, musicians, of course, musicians. A musician, a musician must become a music lover must become a musician. An artist must become an artist must paint. A poet must write. If he does so, he is happy. It is something like so whatever a person is willing to do for no money, willing to do for the sake of nothing, if he is allowed to do that, then that is called self fulfillment. That is the stage of self fulfillment. So that is possible only by ensuring all these stages one, two, three, four. When you ensure all these stages, then you can pursue your passion. Do what you want to do. But to reach to that, we have to cross one, two, three, four stages. This is a Maslow's need hierarchy theory, which works very much true even in the organizations. Then looking at Herzberg's theory, how it is related to motivation. Here also we have the same five steps: physiological, security, social, esteem, and self-fulfillment. Wherein what Herzberg has done is he has drawn a line, dotted line in the mid of fourth step, in the mid of fourth step, that is esteem. He says some part of the esteem is there is a thin line between the word self-esteem and ego. Self-esteem and ego. He says self-esteem will go towards, take you towards self-fulfillment, and ego is a part of level 1, 2, 3, 4. Step number 1, 2, 3, 4. So he says these four factors: physiological, security, social, and ego. These four factors are called as maintenance factors. Then when you understand, when you convert the ego into self-esteem, then you are very near to self-fulfillment. That is called motivators. Motivators. So this is how, according to Herzberg, the absence of the certain job factor tend to make workers dissatisfied. However, presence of the same factors in themselves does not produce high level of motivation. They are called as maintenance factors or hygiene factors, since they are necessary to maintain a reasonable level of satisfaction to serve as a takeoff point for the motivation. See, look at this. What are these maintenance factors? Suppose in a factory, there is sufficient light, sufficient water, sufficient toilet facilities, etc. Even canteen facility is there, and the people are working in the organization. People are working in the organization. Because they are there, it does not mean they are working with full heart and mind. But if you remove any one of the facility, if you remove any one of the facility, then people will be dissatisfied. So look at the things. So therefore, to people keep on the track, it's not to make them satisfied. It's not to make them satisfied. These are the maintenance factors like canteen, toilets, fresh water, light, transport. All these things are maintenance factors. Just they maintain the working culture in the people. If you remove any one of them, immediately the people will be dissatisfied. Therefore, these such factors are called as maintenance factors. If you come to the individual side, they are physiological, security, social, and ego. These are the maintenance factors. Then coming to self-esteem and self-fulfillment, they becomes motivational factors. Quickly, let us take at the next question, write a note on barriers of communication. Barriers of communication. So let us understand what is communication first. Then we can look at the barriers of communication. What is communication? Communication is very simple. Whatever I am trying to express, the meaning and the feeling has to be understood the same way by the receiver. By the receiver. Communication is an exchange of facts, ideas, or opinions and emotions. Communication is an exchange of facts, ideas, opinions, and emotions by two or more persons. By two or more persons. One thing is very important, they must be understood in the same way. They must be understood in the same way. When communication stops, when communication stops, organized actions come to an end. Look at this. This is very important. You might have experienced this in the family. When there is a fight in the members of the family, then communication stops. Communication stops means it's a dead silence. Same thing happens in the organization also. If communication stops, organized actions come to an end. Looking at what are the barriers of the communication, barriers of the communication. Faulty chain of command, distrust, distrust of distrust of communicator, restricting communication, poor retention, different backgrounds, in group language, in group language, inattention, physical barriers, poor understanding, badly expressed message. These are few of the barriers to communication. Why a message does not reach the other, the next person, is because of all these things. Either it is badly expressed, it is chain of command is wrong, distrust of the communicator, restricting communication, poor attention, different backgrounds, language, inattention, physical barriers, poor understanding. These are few of the barriers to communications. So further part we'll see in our next class. Let us stop here.